Too many buttons. All right, so we're live everywhere. I'm going to go let people in. Wow. All right, then. All right, welcome everybody to a Freethinkers Corner, Books and More, our first of a Frightmare Before Christmas author event. Of course, if you don't know that there is a darker side to the Christmas holiday season over in Europe. Krampus, not if I said it right, Krampus, and it's where this monster comes and takes the bad children away, as to where Santa rewards the good children. So I thought, in the spirit of the holiday, let's go ahead and do a Frightmare Before Christmas. So today we got starting the whole thing. We have Gregory Bastianelli from right here in Dover, New Hampshire. He's the author of 3 books, Loonies, Joker's Club, and his latest, Snowball. Read it, fantastic book. Nice slow simmer to it, and then it just keeps snowballing and snowballing and snowballing. Fantastic book. He's written many stories which have been featured in numerous magazines, both online and in print. And he worked for quite a long time in a small daily newspaper. Greg, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate you doing this event. It's certainly a fun series, and you got a lot of great authors lined up for it. So I'm excited to tune into most of them for the next couple of weeks. And as you can see, or if you can see, I am wearing my Krampus shirt today.
I did see that, yes.
So trying to get into the holiday spirit. And it's hard to see on my bookshelf, but I do have my Krampus on the shelf. So I keep him on the shelf handy and for the holiday season. So anyway, so I'm excited to be here. And as Chris said, I have 3 books out right now. My very first book was Joker's Club, came out in 2011. And Joker's Club is, I like to call it a horror whodunit. It's, if you can imagine, this book being written by the love child of Stephen King and Agatha Christie. The basic plot for the book is kind of an old-fashioned mystery whodunit, group of people gathered in an inn. But there's a lot of horror and supernatural overtones to it, though it's kind of a kind of book where it treads a fine line between the real and the unreal. So you can read this and think everything is in its natural state, or you could read it and think something supernatural is going on. Kind of depends on how you interpret it. But the basic plot of this is a writer returns to his hometown to a gathering of his friends, some childhood friends he hadn't seen in a long time. They were the Joker's Club back when they were kids growing up, and they kind of disbanded after a tragic event, a prank that kind of went awry and led to tragic results. So years later, the main character is a struggling author trying to rediscover his imagination. And he finds returning to his hometown for this gathering rekindles the imagination that he had lost over the years. and but with it brings a lot of dire consequences, and the people that gather with him at the end start getting bumped off. So my second book is actually, my second book, Loonies, is actually a pure mystery, but it's more than just a who done it. It's more like a who, what, when, where, why, and how done it. The main character is a newspaper reporter who relocates to a small town with his pregnant wife. And in the new house that they inhabit, they discover a locked steamer trunk in the attic. And once he opens this trunk, as pictured on the cover, it sort of triggers a series of events in the town that leads to murder, madness, mayhem, all kinds of things. It's not really just one mystery going on in this book. There's layers of mysteries. It's like the town is a rotten onion, and as this reporter peels back all these layers of this onion, the stench gets worse and worse. And that book came out in 2015. And as Chris mentioned, my latest book, which came out earlier this year, is Snowball. And Snowball is about a group of travelers who end up getting snowbound on a highway during the middle of a blizzard on Christmas Eve. It's set in New Hampshire, and as actually all my books are set in New Hampshire so far. But these group of motorists find themselves stuck in this blizzard, this raging blizzard on the highway. They become trapped in their cars, and they realize that there's something menacing out in the storm that's much worse than the wind and the snow and the cold. And as they're struggling to survive, they kind of band together to order to help each other. They gather inside an RV of one of the drivers stuck on the road and seek shelter there and try and wait out the storm because it appears that rescue is not coming. And eventually they realize that there's some connection amongst them that may be a reason that they all came to this highway. It's not just a coincidence that they were brought to this highway. They all ended up at this highway at the same time. And I won't tell too much more of the story, but there may actually be an appearance of the legendary Krampus creature in this book. Actually, there is, but it's not about Krampus. It's about winter, and it's about the horrible things that happen in winter. And my inspiration for this book is really just kind of growing up in New Hampshire and experiencing all the terrible things in winter, especially the blizzard of '78, which a lot of you out there probably remember very well. And just the pure misery that winter in New England can cause. And I kind of gathered all these stories together and things that terrible things that can happen in the winter, and put them all together in this one book. And it was a fun book to write about. Like Chris says, it starts a little slow and then kind of builds and builds, and then kind of chaos lets loose. And the characters in my book, they're all haunted by things in their Christmases past or winters past. And some of these things affect them today and come back to haunt them. And there's sort of an underlying evil in the story that's sort of controlling everything that's happening around them. And that's probably more than I should say. But it's a fun book. It's a nice seasonal book. So it's perfect time for the Christmas season. The whole story takes place over the course of Christmas Eve and Christmas morning with these people and their things that they have to endure on this highway in this raging blizzard. And this book came out at the end of January. And of course, when the year started off, I was very excited. Couldn't wait for the book to come out. And I had lots of promotional events planned. And I was very fortunate to get two bookstore events in February before the pandemic seemed to take over the rest of our lives and kind of upset everything. I had plenty more events throughout the year planned, including a trip to England for the Horror Writers Association's annual convention and Stoker Awards, where my publisher was going to be promoting the book there, and I was going to be promoting the book there. And of course, like everything else in 2020, that went down the drain. And every event I had planned for the year has been ended up being canceled, included the Nikon Writers Camp, Free Comic Book Day, and Christopher Golden's Halloween Book Festival in October, Salem Market Day, all the fun events that we all like to do, all us authors like to participate in, everything got canceled. I also had planned to go to the New York Book Expo to be with my publisher, to promote the book there, and that got canceled. So I'm glad Chris is doing this event. Really, that's all us writers are allowed these days, is to resort to these online events. And I'm grateful for that opportunity. It's just one way that we can kind of get the word out on our books. A lot of great books came out this year from a lot of a great variety of horror authors. Paul Tremblay's Survivor Song came out earlier this year. Alma Katsu's The Deep came out. Mexican Gothic from Sylvia Garcia came out. And Christopher Golden's Red Hands is coming out this month, next week. Actually, I think this week. So, and Josh Malerman's Bird Box came out early this year. A lot of great books came out. And unfortunately, a lot of us authors really have our hands tied with trying to promote them. And it's been a tough struggle, but we're trying to endure, and we appreciate all the readers out there who support us and support the local bookshops. I know this pandemic has created a tough battle for local businesses and especially independent bookstores. So I always encourage people, get your books through independent bookstores. They really, they do a great job promoting events like this, featuring authors. And you know, it's a great thing to support them. So, and if anybody has any questions, send them in to Chris. We're more happy to answer things. I'd like to talk a little bit more about my second book, Loonies. I worked for 18 years at a local newspaper right here in Dover, as Chris mentioned, Foster's Daily Democrat. And this book was kind of inspired by my years at the newspaper. There was actually, before I started working there was a story in the area, came out of Somersworth, about a locked steamer trunk that someone discovered in their house. And it was a steamer trunk that had been sitting there for 30 or more years. And when the people opened it up, it was quite a grisly discovery of what was in the steamer trunk. And I had always been fascinated with that story. And when I worked at the newspaper, we always did updates on it because it was considered an unsolved case. And every now and then on anniversary dates, it would be, you know, another story in the paper about, you know, whatever happened with the this locked steamer trunk in Somersworth. So, so that kind of just kindled my imagination, and I started thinking about this story for quite a while, and decided to take that idea of the real Somersworth trunk case and just kind of make up my own story about what the contents of the trunk meant and how it affected the people in this town I created. So I used a lot of my experiences at the newspaper. Different events that happened in this book were inspired by things that stories that I dealt with when I worked at the newspaper. So it was kind of sort of my love letter to working in a newspaper. And it was a lot of fun to write. And when I was promoting this book, I had a book event in Dover, and it was at I had kind of like a book release party at a local pub, the Loft at Stratford Farms, and we had a great turnout. I think there was almost 100 people there, and I signed some copies and then mingled with some people, and then I stopped at one table to talk to someone I knew, and he was sitting with an older man that I didn't know, and the older man turned out to be the former chief of police of the Somersworth Police Department, who was in charge of this investigation, or in charge of the police department when the real Somersworth trunk case was investigated. So that was kind of neat. I talked with him for a little bit, and I told him how I was fascinated with the original story, and how after decades, this mysterious case just still remained unsolved. And this former police chief told me, he goes, "No, it's not unsolved. We know everything that happened." He said, "It's just they can't do anything about it because everybody involved is dead." So that was kind of neat. A little surprised that I wasn't expecting on my night of my book release party, but it was kind of a fun thing to experience. So all my books have been set in New Hampshire so far. I have hopefully a new book that I've turned into my publisher, and it's actually set on an island off the coast of Maine. So I'm straying a little bit from my New Hampshire roots and all the way to Maine, about 75 miles offshore. I don't know when the release date will be on that. Still waiting. Like everything in the pandemic world that we're in now, everything's moving at a really slow pace. My publisher was hit just as hard as all the other businesses in the world. They're based out of London. And as you know, the UK is having a real struggle over there as well as we are here. So everything's moving at a snail's pace. And so hopefully, keeping my fingers crossed that I'll hear some news about when that may be ready for to set a release date. In the meantime, the book is about an insurance investigator who goes to an island off the coast of Maine to document the effects of shadow flicker from wind turbines on residents that live near them on this island. And in the course of his investigation, he stumbles upon something much more mysterious than what's going on with the wind turbines. And it's kind of a different type of book than my others. I mean, all three of mine, I think, are a little different from each other's, but this one is, I don't even know how to classify this one. It's not really a horror story. It has some speculative imagination elements to it, but it's not really a mystery, but it's very mysterious. So I kind of call it my mysterious book, because this insurance investigator doesn't really know what's going on, and there's just a lot of weird things going on this island and some of the residents that he encounters. So hopefully, maybe we'll see that next year. I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Sounds really good. Like I said, I read Snowball, and all I could picture was the movie Krampus that came out a few years ago.
Yeah.
There are some snowmen in it, and that's kind of what reminded me of it. And then what I liked is that everybody, you have most people have a connection, which I thought was really good. And as the book progresses, you led on to the connection, how everybody's connected. I read an article from back in June in Decibel magazine online, and you talk about your love of horror came at an early age, a lot from watching Creature Double Feature, which those who are our age remember Creature Double Feature. Saturday mornings from noon to 4, glued in front of the TV.
Yes, that was like a religious experience.
Yep. Yeah. Did the whole cartoon run in the morning, had lunch, and then did Creature Double
Yeah.
Feature, and then got kicked out of the house for the rest of the day. Um, and so you watched a lot of B movies. Said by the time your love of reading horror stories and watching horror movies evolved, your desire to write was around age 11. Uh, and you began your first foray into enjoying music and even bought your first 45 single. And that is kind of what got you hooked on heavy metal and rock music. I also read on your bio that you got to interview Alice Cooper when you were working for
Yes.
Foster's. You were talking about how Loonies, your book Loonies, was based on a true story. Had the lyrics from certain songs, or let me start with, who was the most influential, if any, band or singer or song influenced your work?
Yeah. Well, I would have definitely probably say Alice Cooper. Alice Cooper was the first album I ever bought. My sister took me to the local department store and helped me pick out my first album, and she was the one who suggested Alice Cooper. I don't know if she had some insight into what kind of person I was going to become at that point. I was probably only about early teens, maybe 13, 14. And I just loved, probably because I loved horror movies and reading horror books, just the darkness in his songs, the Ballad of Dwight Fry, Dead Babies, I Love the Dead. I mean, all that stuff just was like, I mean, this was like a discovery. I didn't realize, wow, music can be just full of horror, just like that. And then, of course, his stage shows were, not that I got to see him at an early age, but later on, as I got to see him live in his stage shows, I had read so much about his stage shows with the snake and the guillotine. I mean, going to a rock show and seeing the singer's head get cut off in the guillotine. I mean, that's great. I mean, I actually had a toy model of a guillotine on my, bureau when I was growing up. I used to do model kits and stuff, and I used to do some of the old Universal monster model kits, like the Wolfman and Creature from the Black Lagoon, and then I had a whole series of torture devices, the pendulum and the guillotine and things like that. I used to put all these little model kits together. So yeah, Alice Cooper, he just his music just opened my eyes to just how much fun you could have with the horror theme in music and combining horror and music, much like Black Sabbath is one of my other early loves of bands. Just that whole theatric and horror and insanity and mystery. It was just a perfect combination. I even at one time, I kept thinking at one time I would love to write a novel based on Alice Cooper's music. Maybe someday I'll try it, but it's just kind of an idea I had a while back and tucked away in my book of ideas, and said, that would be a pretty cool story, because his music, especially when he does some of his concept albums like Welcome to My Nightmare and things, and Alice Cooper Goes to Hell, albums that actually really tell a story from beginning to end. So that would be fun.
I've seen Alice Cooper a couple or three times, and this stage show is just, well,
Yeah,
besides the music too, and
the music is great, and
the
his stage
performances.
stage shows, even now. I mean, I saw him just as recently as last year, and it was as a phenomenal stage show as I'd ever seen him put on. And I actually was going to plan to go see him this year.
Yep.
Before all the concerts got canceled along with everything else in 2020.
Yeah. Yeah, my first hook into heavy metal music was Motley Crue's Shout at the Devil.
Oh, yeah.
And from that point, I was just hooked on heavy metal, hair bands, all the 80s stuff and early 90s and stuff. But have you ever worked any of, well, in the Decibel interview, it says that you would play heavy metal music while you're writing.
Yeah.
Have you ever been, while you were writing either a short story or any of your novels, ever all of a sudden just catch a phrase, a lyric, or a couple words from a song and say, that would fit into this book or into this part of the story?
I think somewhat because of just the mood. Some of those songs and lyrics can put you in. What I have done is sometimes when I'm kind of formulating some of my characters, I'll sometimes take inspiration from rock lyrics and sort of incorporate them into a character. If I have a character that's in a certain mood or has a certain attitude, I've sometimes derived that from lyrics that I've listened to in rock music. I think that in Joker's Club, I had a character and kind of a tortured kind of a misfit type character. And there was the lyrics of one of the Creed song, Torn. And I wanted this character to be sort of a torn human. And so that kind of Creed's Torn song kind of inspired what I wanted to try to do with that one particular character. So, and that's always fun. Uh-oh, Chris has frozen. I think Krampus has put a spell on him.
Jumping around, playing air guitar, air drums, and an idea. What has that ever happened?
All right, you were breaking up there, so I couldn't hear the question completely.
Oh, okay. Well, I said when I was doing like book reports or reports for school in high school, I'd put on the music and the rock music and stuff. And if I get stuck, I just kind of take a break, jump around, play air guitar, play air drums or whatever, sing along, and then the idea would come and okay, and I'd get back into it. Has that ever happened to you?
Oh, I would definitely, yes. There's been many times where I've either writing or something, and I'm playing my music, and all of a sudden, yeah, something will hit me, and I just have to get out of the chair. And it may not be sort of something to inspire what I'm working on, but it may be just kind of like takes me take a little break, a little step back, enjoy a little wild moment, and then get right back to work. When I write, one of the things I've never done with any of my books is I've never outlined. So what I do is this before I start to write a book, I've had it germinating in my mind for quite a while, sometimes several years. And then when I sit down to write it, I have just snippets of the story. I have sort of the basic idea. I know where I want to go. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to get there. Sometimes I'm not actually sure where there is going to be. And but I sit down and I find my beginning spot, and then I try to let the story develop naturally. So with Snowball, I knew I was going to have these people stuck on the highway. When I started to get ready to write it, I didn't even know what they were going to be facing yet. And then I sort of started to get some ideas and said, okay. And then I started the writing and I put them there and I said, this is where they are. And now they've got to figure out what to do. And I'm just going to follow along and find their way out of this problem. And then I kept throwing things at them like snowballs. I kept hurling snowballs at my characters and they kept stumbling around. So, but that's a fun way to write. With Loonies, that was a tough one to write because the plot was so intricate and every piece had to fit just right. And so I started with my main character, my reporter, and I said, okay, he discovers this trunk, he opens it, he finds this thing inside. What's a reporter to do? And I tried to treat, from my experience of the newspaper, say, okay, well, this is what he's going to do first, and this is what he's going to do next. He's sort of an investigative reporter, so he's not a cop, but he has investigative skills, and he starts to interview people in town, and he starts to try to unravel this mystery. And I just try to follow the natural progression of this reporter and what he would do and let the story unfold that way. but I had to have a lot of pieces in place, and I changed things as I went along, and it just let the story develop.
I want to just quickly remind everybody who's watching us via Zoom and Facebook Live, just use the chat feature for any questions or comments, and I'll relay them to Greg. I do have one from one of our local writers here too, Tony Tremblay. He asks,
Hey, Tony. Love
have
Tony.
you written? Yep. Have you written or write short stories?
I've written some and had some published in my early years of writing. Lately, I don't know what it is, but lately I've kind of lost a little bit of interest in short stories. I mean, I love short stories, and when I started out as a writer, just that was all I would do, was write short stories, and then all of a sudden, I think sometimes I just go through phases where I'm really into writing short stories, and then I'll stop and be not so into writing stories. And right now, I'm not so into writing short stories. I think I've had some that just not clicking right, and not finding that that good feel for the short story. So, and in the past couple of years, I've been really working on novels. I have right now, beside counting the one that I've submitted to my publisher, I have 4 other novel manuscripts that are done. Sometimes I'm still playing around with some of them, but they're done and they're written. And I wrote 2 this year. The pandemic helped because I had a lot of time off and time at home and not going anywhere during some of the shutdowns. So I had time to work on some of the manuscripts, and I ended up working on 2 different ones and finished 2 different manuscripts just this year, novel manuscripts. And over the last couple of years, I've just been focusing on that. But if I ever do come up with a good idea for a short story, I'm right on that. The funny thing is, a couple of my manuscripts, not the ones that are published, but unpublished ones, they were started out as ideas for short stories. And then the more I thought about them before sitting down to write, I kept realizing that there was more to the story, and I could actually develop it as a full-length novel.
In your bio, well, along with interviewing Alice Cooper, you also interviewed B-movie icon Bruce Campbell of The Evil Dead. So along with those movies and the Creature Double feature, is there any particular movies that influence your writing?
Well, I think that I started out watching a lot of those, like I said, the B movies, the Universal horror movies were probably the first movies I remembered as a young kid. And that was, sparked my interest in monsters and horror and all that. What I like in movies, and I try to translate into some of my books, is the idea of people becoming unhinged from reality. And that's kind of a scary concept, because part of the idea of loonies is that there are people out there who are just they're really crazy, and but they're functioning as normal citizens of this town, and they've just kind of, like I said, become unhinged from reality. And I kind of like that whole concept, because it is a frightening concept, whether it's supernaturally unhinged because of supernatural reasons or just because of psychological reasons. So I kind of like movies like that these days. Shutter Island was, did a fantastic job with that. That was a great book and movie. I can't think of anything that comes to mind right now, but movies where the main character, like in my Joker's Club, doesn't know what's real and what's not real. And that can be frightening, because there's a lot of people out there that I think that don't know what's real.
Right. We have a question from Holly Beaverstock. How long does it take you to write a novel? And you just mentioned something where you've gotten some of your ideas.
Um, it varies as far as length of time. I lately it's been around maybe 6 months to do an initial draft, maybe 6 to 8 months, not counting going back and doing the rewrites, but just from start to finish of that very first draft. It used to take me like about a year, but I've kind of been a little more prolific in that department. And I don't know if it's just the ideas are just gelling better. So I say, 6 to 8 months, give or take, but usually less than a year. But then the rewriting starts, and that sometimes can be a little longer, depending on how things go. And some of those unfinished manuscripts I've mentioned, unpublished manuscripts, they're done, but some of them I still want to work on some more. And that's one of the problems with, as soon as I come out, as soon as some of these books have been published, there were things I wanted to change in them, or things I wanted to do differently. But once the publisher's sending that final proofread to publication, there's not much you can do about that.
One thing that interests me, and it interests some of the folks here, is how you come up with the names for your characters, their personalities, the experiences that they have. Has any of your personal life, personal friends, family, whatever, worked their way into your novels?
I specifically try to avoid putting people I know or characteristics of people I know into my books. I may take pieces of people I've encountered and maybe put them together with other pieces to make some kind of a mishmash of a character, but I've never specifically based a character on a real person. I think every writer does put part of themselves into their stories. I would say Joker's Club probably is the closest where I've put a lot of my experiences into, as my main character is a struggling writer, and that's what I was at the time. And I may have, sort of based some of that on personal experiences and feelings and emotions and stuff like that. But I never specifically put a character in. I try to avoid even naming a character after anyone whose name I know, because I want
so you don't have to write that disclosure at the front saying that all characters are.
It's a good thing that disclosure is there. When my first novel, Joker's Club, came out, I had a character name, and I had two people with that same name, friends of mine, say, "Oh, you put me in your book," and I'm like, "No, I did not put you in the book." So ever since that, I specifically try to, which is kind of getting harder and harder the more people I know. It's like I come up with a name, I go, "Oh, wait a minute, I know someone with that name. Let me find someone else's name." So,
well, if you not consciously put somebody in that or an experience or personality that but when you went back and, well, somebody gives you a comment like that, or you've gone back and reread your manuscript for editing purposes or whatever, say, that reminds me of, maybe I should change this, or yeah, I guess you're right, this does remind me of so-and-so.
Yeah. I hopefully I haven't had that. Hopefully my characters won't resemble anyone that someone will recognize, but it is entirely possible. I won't deny that. Yes, I will deny it. I will deny it.
We'll deny it. Okay. So we have a question here. Would you say that you're unhinged from reality, and to what degree?
Ninth degree. I don't know. Yeah, I like to step away from reality sometimes, especially this year. Boy, it's been hard to step away from reality this year. But I think my mind does tend to wander. But I think I try to remain firmly gripped in the real world as best I can.
I don't want to go too much on how much is influence, because you've talked a lot about what influences you, but with the pandemic, though, has some of that influenced some of the things that some of the ideas that you have coming up?
Well, actually, yes. The last manuscript I just finished, which I'm still working on, but I started in June and finished the first draft actually finished several drafts in October, is a pandemic-inspired story. Um, and I don't want to talk about too much because it's so fresh, but I definitely got a lot of inspiration from what was going on in the world, especially what was going on in Italy, because I have family and relatives in Italy. I pay close attention to what was going on there because that was where in the Western Hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere really started there before it ended up here. And they went through a really horrible uh, time and still having some struggles. But when I was reading some of the news stories out of Italy, they read like horror stories, and that inspired me to with an idea for a manuscript that like I said, I just finished third or fourth draft, but I'm still playing around with it some more. But it was really a really fun one to write, but probably the most serious thing that so far that I've written.
And so I know we're talking about books and writing, so I kind of wanted to end this line of thought or questioning with this. Who, in your bio, you say that Ray Bradbury, Richard Matheson, Ramsey Campbell, and Stephen King were definitely influences on your writing. Any one more in particular than another, or just sort of just a combination of all of them?
I think it was more like a progression. When I was very young in elementary school, and I'd go to the library, Ray Bradbury was one of the first writers of note that I discovered and started to read. And then as that was sort of my elementary, junior high era with the Halloween Tree and Something Wicked This Way Comes, and his wonderful short stories. And then as I got older, a teenager in high school, I had started reading Richard Matheson, mostly because I watched a lot of movies, and every time I'd see this awesome movie and I'd look and it would say based on a novel by Richard Matheson or based on a story by Richard Matheson, I said, I got to find out this guy, you know? So I went out and discovered a lot of his works, Hell House and I Am Legend and The Shrinking Man and The Stir of Echoes, and his name was everywhere. And he just he was a modern day type of writer at that time. He brought horror out of the Gothic era into the modern era, and then he was just a natural progression to Stephen King, because you can actually see a lot of Richard Matheson's influence on Stephen King. A lot of early Stephen King stuff was you can see the natural transition from Matheson and the influence he had on King. The Shining is King's haunted house story, and even King says he wouldn't have written The Shining if it wasn't for Hell House from Richard Matheson. And Salem's Lot is definitely a descendant of I Am Legend. So you see a lot of that. So it was just kind of a natural progression.
Have you ever done the pilgrimage up to his house?
I have not. I know a lot of my writer friends have, and I would like to someday. And of course, now they've announced recently that they're turning his house into a writer's retreat.
Mm.
And I don't know the details on it yet, but I would certainly love to experience that in that way and go up there as part of a writer's retreat. That would be fabulous.
Now, I know you belong to the Horror Writers Association. What other do you belong to? Do you belong to any of the writers groups? How important is that, especially now with the pandemic? How important is that to have that sort of support group when you can't go to these clubs? And have you ever done the NaNoWriMo?
I also belong to the New England Horror Writers, which is a local area, New England area group. And that's been fantastic. I've met probably the majority of my writer friends, or pretty much all of my writer friends, through either the New England Horror Writers or the Horror Writers Association. Most of the people that you are having on your Frightmare Before Christmas are all authors I've met through the New England Horror Writers Group. It's great because writing is, and I've always thought of writing as a lonely profession, and that's the way I thought of it and grew up thinking of it, and figured that's how I would experience. I didn't realize that I would become immersed in these writing communities and go to these conventions and these events, and it's great, and that's one of the sad things about 2020 is we haven't been able to do all these types of events. The Halloween Book Festival in Haverhill, Mass. That Christopher Golden started. That's one of my favorite events of the entire year, and I look forward to it every year. And it's such a fun. There's usually more than 50 authors there and artists, and it's just a great day, and there's always a great turnout, and you meet new people every year there. And it's just it's too bad, and I know everyone out there misses each other, and hopefully one day we'll be able to all be back together again.
Yeah, we went to when we first opened the store. We met John McKelvey and Chris Golden down at the Haverhill Library there for that, and so yeah, we were looking forward to going to that again and meeting some new people. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to do this. I wanted to do this back in October because they couldn't have it. Things just weren't going the way I was hoping they would go, but then I came up with this idea for the Frightmare Before Christmas. I thought that was a good thing, but so kind of want to switch gears a little bit and start and talk to you about the technical aspect of writing in general. You mentioned that you don't use an outline, you just kind of let things come, you get the idea, and then you just sort of go. When you have a new idea for a book, how do you start? When do you like to write? Do you like to write in the morning, in the afternoon? We know you like to have rock music going in the background when you write. Walk us through your whole process of starting and then finishing a novel.
All right. Well, first of all, an idea sits for a long time. An idea will germinate sometimes for years. I'll take notes. I'll write notes, even though I don't outline. I take notes, and notes might be just an idea for a scene, or a lot of times it's just a series of images. Once the idea starts to germinate and I get kind of a visual image of aspects of the story, I'll jot notes down and say, oh, this scene here would be really cool. It would be neat if something like this happened. But I don't really have a story yet. I just have a bunch of ideas and images. And it takes sometimes a while before I feel like I'm ready to, okay, now put this all together, or try to put it together. And I write at night. I get up too early in the morning for my day job to be able to write in the morning. So I write in the evening, and except during the pandemic, when I had 3 or 4 months off from work and could just get up in the morning and just write right away. That was great. I love that. Not that I love the pandemic, but so I have usually several ideas. I have notebooks full of ideas, and whenever I think of something related to one of my ideas, I just will jot a little note down, or a little, I might be a character or something, and then when I feel that I'm ready to immerse myself into this story, I will sit down and just plunge right into it. It's kind of a daunting feeling, because I actually feel very nervous, and as I'm sitting down ready to type that very first line, because I know that once I start, I'm in for the long haul. And it's really, writing the first page is great, but I know I got 300 plus more to go. And it seems like a long way away. But especially if I'm not exactly sure how the story is going to flow. But sometimes once I get rolling, things just fall into place. And that's one of the magical things about writing, is sometimes the story does, and other authors will say this, sometimes the story does write itself. I'll be going along, and the ideas will just pop up, and I'm like, oh yeah, of course, that would be cool. That makes perfect sense. And I don't know where that's coming from. Who knows?
Have
But
you ever
it just, starts to flow.
have you ever found yourself backing yourself kind of in a corner where you're working on one part? You go to have you ever, do you do that? Do you do one part and then kind of stop if you get stuck, move on to a different part, join them together at some point? But then do you find that you backed yourself into a corner because it doesn't mesh right or the
Uh,
timeline isn't right?
yeah. One thing that I don't do is I don't correct fix as I'm going along. So once I have the story and I'm, in the midst of a story, and I realize that, something earlier is not right or needs fixing, I'm not going to go back and fix it. I keep plowing ahead. Um, what I will do is in my notebooks, I will make a note saying, oh, go back and fix this, or, oh, this needs something because it's not going to work. And so I just keep going forward. I never look back, but I know what's behind me, and I know if because I will make changes as the story evolves and ideas will occur to me in the midst of writing. I know it's going to affect something that I've written previously. And with my book Loonies, I was more than halfway through it when I had this brilliant idea of something that could be related to one of the characters, but it meant going back and making sure that all those pieces fit for that to happen. And it did. I made it fit. So, so that does happen where I got to go back and look at things and fix things or change things. But I just keep my notes going and know when I have to go and make adjustments.
Now, do you carry like a notebook around with you, a small notepad, a phone that you can write on in case you have an idea when you're out with family and friends or in the
Wherever
middle
I
of doing
am,
something?
yeah, wherever I am, there's usually easy access to a notebook. I keep a notebook in my car. I keep a notebook by in my nightstand by my bed. I have notebooks at work. I have notebooks at home. Um, so um, I so I usually try to have a notebook everywhere. There have been times where I've thought of something and I didn't have a notebook, and I said to myself, okay, just remember that. And then hours later, I'll be like, oh, what was that idea? And I'm like, oh, darn it all. So yeah, I should have one more often on me all the time, because that does happen. I forget something. I think, oh, I'll remember this. And then 5 hours later, what was
Forget
that?
it. Right.
But,
There's you must have seen the TV show there, The Big Bang Theory. There's one episode, one scene where Sheldon is in the zone and nobody can bother him because he's writing something down, he's working some math problem out or something, and he's in the zone. Have you ever been so in the zone that you're just like, nope, in the zone, leave me alone?
um, yes, I would say yes. Sometimes more often that happens is when I'm lying in bed at night and I have something on my mind, and I I have to get up and write it down. I want to say it was the pandemic inspired novel that I am working on now and just finished, where I actually couldn't sleep because something was on my mind, and it was maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, and I just got up and went into my office and sat down and just wrote 2 or 3 pages of notes. One time I was on vacation and I was in Gettysburg, and I had an idea, and I got up and I'm looking for that little hotel notepad with the pen, because I said, I got to write this down. I got to write this down. And as soon as the next day when we left the hotel to continue on our journey, the first place I stopped was a Dollar General to go in and buy a notebook, because I didn't have a big enough notebook with me. I just had the little hotel notepad. So yeah, that happens.
So the book is finished. You're ready for editing. Do you, I'm sure you go through it yourself to try to find this, that, and the other thing, make sure everything fits. Do you use beta readers as a second line of editing, or do you hire out to professional editors, or both?
I have never used beta readers, and it's funny that you asked that because I used to hear other authors talk about beta readers. This was a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago. And I was actually embarrassed because I didn't know what beta readers were. I'm like, why is he talking? What's a beta reader? And I'm thinking that, I know what a Betamax VCR used to be, but what's a beta reader? So I was at one of the horror writers conventions. It was in Atlanta, and one of the panel discussions was on beta readers. So I said, well, I got to go check this out. And I learned what beta readers were. And it was a panel with several of my writer friends on it that they were all part of a big beta reader group. And I said, oh, wow. But I've never tried to ask anyone to be a beta reader. I think part of it, I guess I always assumed writer was a lonely profession and I'm supposed to be just doing it all by myself and supposed to squirrel myself away in a little room and not talk to anybody. So when I'm done a manuscript, I just send it off to my publisher and the editor of my publisher and let them take care of the rest. So no one, I guess part of me is also afraid that someone's going to not want to change my story, but what if they make a suggestion, even if it's a great suggestion, but I don't want to do it because it wasn't my suggestion. So I don't know. Maybe one day I'll find a beta reader or two and see, because some of my unfinished manuscripts probably could use a couple of look throughs by someone other than me.
Yeah, well, I'm always willing to do that, and if you want to throw it our way. But so you went the traditional publisher route. Why did you? How did you decide to do that instead of just self-publishing?
Well, with my first book, Joker's Club, it was a long route to being published. It's actually almost embarrassing, but when I started Joker's Club, I started on a manual typewriter. That's how long ago I started this book, because computers didn't exist yet, or they didn't exist in the abundancy that personal computers that people had. So I started writing that on a manual typewriter. Then I shifted it to one of those old-fashioned Smith Corona word processors that had like 7 lines of type that you could see on this tiny little screen. And of course, it meant retyping the whole thing into this word processor. And then I switched to, when I got my first personal computer, I once again had to retype the whole thing because nothing was compatible. I had to retype the whole thing into the personal the personal computer. And then I ended up finishing it on a laptop. But I guess I never thought about self-publishing because part of me lacked the confidence in knowing whether my book was really good. So I think I needed that validation that someone is going to say, yes, this is worth publishing. So I kind of felt that I wanted that. And it took me a while. In fact, my first publisher was Journal Stone. They published my first 2 books. My newest book now, Snowball, was with Flame Tree Press out of England. But when I was was trying to get Joker's Club published, I rewrote that book, I don't know how many times, over years and years. I would set it aside and 2 or 3 years later, pick it up again and stuff like that. I was writing a lot of short stories in between, but I never tried another novel. I kept focused on that one novel, which probably wasn't the best way to approach it. But so I finally did what I said was going to be one final rewrite. I said, I'm going to do one more rewrite on this thing, and then I'm not going to touch it again until somebody wants to publish it. And at that same time, I had finished that one last rewrite that I promised I was going to do. And I stumbled upon a horror novel contest that Journal Stone was running. And I entered it in the contest, and I came in second place, and they published the book, and that got me on my start. And then they published Loonies a few years later.
How did
So it's been a long book.
It's been a long road. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yep. From the Apple IIe up to the laptop. How did you come up with the cover art for all the books? Was that
Um,
somebody designed it for you? Did you what? How much say did you have in it? Was it something you presented?
the publishers contract out to the cover artists, but they with all three of my books, the editors or publishers has asked me for my input. So they would say, "What do you think the cover should look like?" And I would give them my ideas. The hardest one I had was with Snowball. I had no idea what to do for cover. I had a couple of ideas, but I just didn't have one solid image. So I gave them about 5 different images that I said this could make a cool cover. And then they contracted out to whatever artist that they hired to do their covers, and they came up with this, which has nothing to do with any of the ideas I sent them. But I looked at it and I said, wow, this is really cool. And this is probably why I didn't have a good idea for it, because I couldn't come up with a lasting image. But they came up with something that was subtle enough and left you kind of curious as to what's going on here.
You mentioned with the beta readers that you were worried about somebody changing. How much change did you have to do, like with Snowball, or actually any of them? Which one did you have to change the most based on your publishers or the editor's recommendations?
Well, fortunately, I haven't had to change any of them very much. Most of the edits, all the editors that I've worked with have been very minor edits, nothing overly dramatically changing the story at all. So I feel grateful for that. I don't know what I would do if I had to be confronted with a problem that meant a total, rewriting of a manuscript, but so far so good.
What was the longest part of the process, the editing part or the cover art?
Surprisingly, they came up with a cover all 3 times. The cover art came up really quickly. I was surprised how fast that they would get these books commissioned and the artwork done. The editing process, it's a back and forth process. The publisher usually has a copy editor that will go over edits, and the editor will go over edits, and a copy editor will go over edits, and it goes back and forth. And I look at the changes and the fixes and give my input or either agree with what or don't agree with what they say. I usually tend to agree, because there was one time I didn't agree, and I realized afterwards I should have agreed. But other than that, it's just a back and forth process, but it's not too grueling.
So what have you done, pandemic this year, 2020 in general aside, what are some of the typical things that you do besides conventions for marketing your books?
I try to do as much as I can on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I don't feel I got a firm grasp on all of the social media stuff. So that's been kind of hit or miss. I've just this past year have finally launched actually it was earlier this year, I launched a web page. I had a friend who is a web designer. He designed a web page for me. So www.gregorybastianelli.com. You got to spell the name right though to get it. And that came out great. I loved the look of the web page, and that was exciting to have. I don't know if anyone looks at it, but it's there.
Yep.
Good. I just try to reach out to small bookstores like yourself. As soon as I heard you opened up, I marched right down to your bookshop and introduced myself. But that's been great. Water Street Books and X has been great. Jetpack Comics, Pandemonium Books in Cambridge, Mass. I did an event there with some other authors, and so I try to reach out to a lot of bookstores. When Snowball came out in January, I had this plan to hit as many bookshops as I could. I was going to call it the Great Northeast Blizzard Tour. Well, it made 2 stops and then everything died because of the pandemic. But going to conventions is great. And the New England Horror Writers, they try to do promotional events as well. We do the Salem Market Day, Halloween weekend, and they do other events, Granite State, Comic-Con, and things like that. So I've done some of those events with them and some other organizations that do writers events, and try to hit as many things like that as I can, and just try to get word of mouth out. Luckily the publisher sends review copies out and gets a lot of reviews. My publisher did a blog tour, review tour, where they had various book bloggers write up reviews and promote the book. They did like a 2-week blog tour, so that was something new for me. And luckily, my publisher has a marketing department, so they're doing their share to market the book, which is great. And when things like the London Book Fair and the New York Book Expo aren't being canceled, that's, those are good things, but they're working hard.
Do you ever read the reviews?
Yes, I do. And I even read the bad ones. I find the bad ones sometimes just as interesting as the good ones, because it made me think about, I wonder if I could have done something differently so this person wouldn't feel that way. But you got to take it with a grain of salt. Some people just, aren't going to like something, and I'm the same way. I might not like something that everyone else likes, but it's encouraging when I see most of the reviews are really good. Goodreads, there's a lot of reviews on Goodreads.com, and I think there's like over 130 reviews on there, and I'd say 95% of them are good. So
have you ever worked some of those I don't want to say negative reviews, but some of those critical reviews, have you worked those comments into the new books, your new manuscripts? Like, yeah, you know what, maybe I should have included that with Snowball or Joker. I'll include that idea in this next one.
I don't think so. Not that I can recall, not consciously, maybe unconscious, subconsciously.
Okay, that review was just a bunch of crap. I'll let that one go.
Yeah, he's gonna hate anything I write. So, but
so we have one local author in the store who, in the times of travel, would go and bring a couple copies of her books with her to leave at airports and train stations that she's never been to, as I guess marked with her like a business card or a bookmark in it with their contact information and stuff and website. Have you ever thought, or have you ever done anything like that?
I think the closest thing I've done is one of my trips to Italy. A couple of times I visited my family's village in Italy, small little village, and I brought a copy of Loonies, and I donated it to the public library in my family's village. They have an English book section in their library, and I donated it to them. Took a picture with the librarian holding the book, and we posed with a picture of the book, and I promoted that online. I said, anyone in the area that wants to read my book, it's right here at the local library in Atina, Italy. So I have done that. I don't think I've brought the book and left it at random places other than that. Not that I recall.
When you were promoting Joker, did you ever dress up like a Joker when you were out at conventions or stuff?
No, but I did a few years before that wear a jester costume for 2 Halloweens in a row. Not even really thinking that, oh, wait a minute, I'm in a jester costume and I'm working on this book that features a jester. That wasn't intentional, but no, I did not dress up for anything like that.
Now, I'm pretty sure that all three of your books, or at least the last couple, definitely Snowball, are in ebook format. Have you ever thought of putting any of them, if not all of them, in audiobook format?
I leave that up to my publisher. I know both my publishers have done some audio books. I initially thought Snowball was going to be released in audio as well, but it wasn't. It may be at a future date. That's something the publisher determines. I don't think I would even know how to attempt to do it on my own, but they have the rights. The publisher owns the rights to release it on audio if they choose. So maybe someday they will. I wish they would, because I know I get that question asked a lot from people. So.
This is my shameless plug for the evening. Is we partner with a company called Libro.fm for our audiobooks, and we promote them. They support us by remitting some of the profits from the sales of their audiobooks to us. One thing that we found out was that some books, they pretty much have everything that that company that shall not be named, I'll name it, Audible. They're pretty much book for book with them, with the exception of those that are exclusively Audible only for however long. We have a couple authors who we've had here in person who that contract has run out. So they're now finally able to go to Libro and put their book through their platform, which now we can promote. So just something, I guess, to consider when it does come time for the publisher to put it on audiobook. Maybe ask if it could be done so that it could be done on the Libro, because definitely we'll promote the book in store. We'll promote it on bookshop.org, which is another company that we partner with, and your books are available through them too. So we'll definitely promote Libro as well. So on the audiobook, we'll just take Snowball. What cast, this is kind of a fun question I like to ask, what cast of famous characters, be they actors, actresses, or if you know of any voice actors or actresses, who would you like to portray your characters in your books in an audiobook?
Oh, in an audiobook. Wow, that's even harder because you can't even see them. I don't know. I don't know if I can answer that, because I'm not. When I write my books, I tend not to. I mean, I picture my characters in my head, but I never picture them as someone who might be an actor or something. I never take an actor's image and portray it onto a character. My characters have got their own image that's been created in my writing, and so I don't know who I would think that would actually portray, even just voicing the characters. I don't know. I have no clue.
What about if it would you ever like to see it as a TV special or on the big screen as a movie?
That would be fabulous. I think all three of my stories I think would be very cinematic. That would be great. I think they're fun stories. I know, I've gotten good feedback from everybody, and several people will say, "Oh, this should be a movie. This should be a movie," and maybe someday.
Any particular director that you would like to direct the movie or produce the movie?
He hasn't directed in a long time, but John Carpenter is one of my favorite directors, and he's just done a fabulous job with in the horror field, and it's just he hasn't directed anything in quite a while, but he's one of the best, I think.
So out of all your books, which one's your favorite?
You can't say that.
Let me ask this. Which one was your favorite to write? Which one just went so well in the writing process that of course, it probably ended as probably your favorite book because it was so easy to write or just flowed so well. Which was your favorite to write, but the story in general, which was your favorite story?
Um, well, I will say this. Snowball probably came together the best just because it just seemed to flow so well once I started getting into it. And there was a lot of elements to Snowball that I hadn't anticipated when I started writing it. And that's one of those magical things that writers experience. And it just, everything gelled. It just kept moving forward. I didn't get bogged down. Uh, and I don't know if it's just that being, my third book, though it's not actually my third manuscript, but my third published book, I'm just continuing to improve the process of writing, where I know what I'm doing more, maybe. Loonies was, I like Loonies a lot because of how intricate the plot is. I don't know if I'll ever write another book with such an intricate plot as Loonies, where Loonies is like a giant jigsaw puzzle, and every single piece had to fit just right for the whole picture to be seen. And it was difficult to do that, but it was fun to do that. Um, and it was an accomplishment. I thought I felt really great how things turned out. I couldn't have been happier with how the story evolved and everything fit and everything came together, and I just loved it. But Snowball just seemed to flow really well, and once it got rolling like a snowball, it just kept building and into this big giant snowball.
And so you had mentioned that you are working on more stuff. You got what, about 4 novels or so now in the works. So you're finding that it's an easier process to write these ones, or?
It seems to be. I don't know why that's the case. Maybe just the more I do it, the more I'm finding it easier, or just the stories are just clicking just right. It could be just that. But I've been very happy with the output that I've been doing the last few years.
We had touched on this a little bit before, but I have Jim Shepard asking, you grew up with some interesting people and enjoyed some very fun, crazy, and unique experiences. Do you anticipate sharing any of those in your future novels?
I deny anything Jim Shepard says. uh, all writers draw from their life experiences. So sometimes I do pepper things into my books and stories. I may change them and alter them so that people like Jim Shepard would not recognize them. But yeah, things tend to have a way of sneaking into the books from my life. But I'll give it my own unique little twist.
Here's a unique question. I never even thought of asking this to any of our past authors, but as most of them have families and they have their process of writing and things like that. But how supportive is your wife when it comes to your writing? Thank you, Tony.
She's just fantastic. I can't say enough about my wife, Rhonda. She tags along when I go to some of these conventions and events. She has that. There have been times when I've let her be the first one to read a manuscript before I send it away to my editor. Not always, but and future ones I will let I do let her read. But she's always there to look out for me, to support me, to help me. I sometimes feel bad. I drag her to some of these things, events and stuff. Though she was very excited to be going to England and Scotland with earlier this year for our big trip that we planned. So, but before that all fell apart. But no, she's been a big rock for me.
Has she made suggestions like maybe a word change or a phrase change or an idea change that you've worked into?
She will definitely give me she's a great note taker. Whenever she reads, whatever she's reading, she reads a lot of health and diet books. And when she reads a book, she takes notes. And when she's read my manuscripts, she takes notes. And she might point out little mistakes here and there, or she might maybe not, something that's not quite clear. I think there was one book where she said the transition in the scene wasn't working for her. She said she was here and then there, and there was something she was missing, and I had to take a deeper look at it and realize that, this is what a reader is going to experience. So I got to make sure. I mean, I can see a story, a scene or something in my head working, but if the reader's not seeing it the same way I am, it's not going to work. So,
have you ever been driving down the road? You're driving, she's sitting in the passenger side, and you say, "Quick, write this down."
no, that's never happened, but it's a good thing to think about.
So in the final few minutes that we have left, what is, just some fun personal things, what is your favorite all-time book? Who is your favorite all-time author? And what are you reading now?
Okay. My favorite all-time author would probably be Ray Bradbury, just because I like the magic of his words. I mean, and just the feel of his stories. I mean, there's been a term coined, Bradbury-esque. And that's the kind of, when I started writing, that's the kind of feel I wanted to get. That kind of feeling of magic and simple life. And his Something Wicked This Way Comes, which I read when I was in junior high, remains one of my all-time favorite novels, and just some of the imagery he's captured in that book. And of course, it's a book about autumn, and that's my favorite season. Autumn is Halloween. Autumn is magical, and Ray Bradbury was the king of autumn.
Yeah, The Martian Chronicles is one of my favorites.
Oh yes, yeah, I love all his stuff. In fact, he did in his later years, he did a series of mystery novels, and the first one was called Death is a Lonely Business, and that kind of feeling in that book was what I was striving for when I was writing Loonies. I wanted to have this quirky kind of mystery story with quirky characters and oddball things happening. And
are you reading anything now?
I am. I'm reading Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. It's a big book. It's more of a fantasy. It was British author Susanna Clarke, and I'm only about halfway through it. I've had to take some breaks because it is a thick book, and what happens is there's so many things I want to read, and when I have a really big book, I feel like it takes my time away from other books. So sometimes I'll find a good spot to stop and I'll put it down and I'll say, oh, let me go and read this. So I put Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell down, and I went and picked up Paul Tremblay's Survivor Song, and I read that, and then they went back to Jonathan Strange, and I bounced around a couple of times. Sometimes I'll have a book at home and a book at work, and I'll be reading two books at the same time. That happens.
What's the most out of character book that or author that you've read? Like you read a lot of Ray Bradbury, but then you take a break from that, and then you go to like Danielle Steele. I mean, what's really the off the wall author that you just kind of took a break from what you were reading just to kind of read something different?
Well, I did read the Lemony Snicket, a series of unfortunate events series several years ago. Absolutely loved it. Just his wordplay, his imagination and creativity, And that, I mean, it's geared to be a kid's book, but I really found it totally entertaining. I mean, it was exciting, it was fun, it was, mysterious. So that was kind of a little different. But I just fell in love with the book series.
Right. Yeah, it's like kind of like the Harry Potters. They're kind of geared towards the kids, but especially as they evolve through the books, they got darker, they got more
Yeah.
mature, which was the intention, I guess. But
Exactly. Yeah.
but the first couple books, I never jumped on the train right away, so to speak. I waited until the dust kind of settled, but once I started reading them, I just couldn't put them down because they were just so fascinating, well written, and just a fun fantasy just to kind of escape into. So as we come to the end, if anybody has any quick questions, either Facebook Live or through here on Zoom, go ahead and ask them now. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and kind of wrap things up. Anything else you'd like to mention or say?
Well, I just want to say that copies of Snowball are available at a Free Thinkers Corner, signed copies, and I think it's important to support your local independent bookstores. Sometimes people don't realize that, people ask me, well, where can I get your book? And I always tell them, go to your local bookstore. If they don't have it, ask them, they'll get it. And people don't realize that just because a bookstore might not have the book doesn't mean that they can't get it. They can get any book they want. So, go to your local bookstore.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things with us. We've gotten so many of our local authors from people coming in asking if we have that particular book. I go look it up. It sounds interesting. I get a few copies. I read one. I get more. And so, yeah, definitely that word of mouth and going in and asking for it. So, Jim says, awesome job. God bless Gregory's dad and uncles in heaven. And I just want to thank everybody for joining us, both on Facebook and on Zoom. Greg, I thank you as well for being our first for our Frightmare Before Christmas. It was a pleasure to have you. And like you said, it's both in our store and on our website too, www.freethinkerscorner.com. Just go to our New England authors section and you'll see a picture of him with the link directly to his page and his book. We'll be definitely getting the other books as well. Sometime hopefully soon, budget permitting, because things are still we're still a little behind, but things are going fairly well, at least for the holiday seasons. Let's hope that it continues into the next year. But again, thank you again, and we hope to have you in store soon for personal signings.
I would love to be in store for one.
Great.
Thank you, Chris.
Y'all have a good night.
Thank you.